she won't be completely immobilized.
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله اللهم صل على أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله أشهد أن عليا حجة الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير العمل حي على خير العمل الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله صلوات على محمد وآل محمد.
Mu'mineen, mu'minat, just a reminder that my salat is qasr. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم أشهد أن محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. أشهد أن عليا ولي الله، وأشهد أن عليا حجة الله صلوات وسلامه عليه. حي على الصلاة، حي على الصلاة، حي على الفلاح، حي على الفلاح، حي على خير عمن، حي على خير عمن، قد قامت الصلاة، قد قامت الصلاة. الله أكبر، الله أكبر، لا إله إلا الله. استغفر الله من كل ذنب وأتوب إليه إنه كان توابا. الله أكبر. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سبحان الله، سبحان الله، سبحان الله. سمعنا لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان الله، سبحان الله، سبحان الله. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. سبحان الله، سبحان الله، سبحان الله. الله أكبر. بحول الله وقوته أقوم وأقعد وأركع وأسجد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم، صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. كذلك الله ربنا. الله أكبر. رب اغفر لي ولوالدي وللمؤمنين يوم يقوم الحساب. رب ارحمهما كما ربياني صغيرا. الله أكبر. سبحان ربي العظيم وبحمده. سبحان الله، سبحان الله، سبحان الله. سمعنا لمن حمده. الله أكبر. سبحان الله، سبحان الله، سبحان الله. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. استغفر الله ربي وأتوب إليه. الله أكبر. سبحان الله، سبحان الله، سبحان الله. سبحان ربي الأعلى وبحمده. الله أكبر. الحمد لله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. والسلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Let us recite Dua Imam Zamana all together. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم.
Brothers and sisters, if you'd like to settle down, inshallah, we'll start with the recitation of Holy Quran in just a few minutes with the Lao Salawat ala Muhammad wa ale Muhammad. But Muhammad wa ale Muhammad Salawat. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وما كان لمؤمن أن يقتل مؤمنا إلا خطأ ومن قتل مؤمنا خطأ فتحرير رقبة مؤمنات ودية مسلمات إلى أهله إلا أن يصدقوا فإن كان من قوم عدو لكم وهو مؤمن فتحرير رقبات مؤمنة وإن كان من قوم بينكم وبينهم ميثاق فديات مسلمات إلى أهله وتحرير رقبات مؤمنة فمن لم يجد فصيام الشهرين متتابعين توبة من الله وكان الله عليما حكيما ومن يقتل مؤمنا متعمدا فجزاؤه جهنم خالدا فيها وغضب الله عليه ولعنه وأعد له عذابا عظيما يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا ضربتم في سبيل الله فتبينوا ولا تقولوا لمن ألقى إليكم السلام لست مؤمنا تبتغون عرض الحياة الدنيا فعند الله مغانم كثيرة كذلك كنتم من قبل فمن الله عليكم فتبينوا إن الله كان بما تعملون خبيرا لا يستوي القائدون من المؤمنين غير أولي الضرر والمجاهدون في سبيل الله بأموالهم وأنفسهم فضل الله المجاهدين بأموالهم وأنفسهم على القاعدين درجة وكلا وعد الله الحسنى وفضل الله المجاهدين على القاعدين أجرا عظيما درجات منه ومغفرة ورحمة وكان الله غفورا رحيما صلوات. Inshallah, to continue with the program for this evening, I'd like to request Brother Amir Heather for recitation of poetry with the loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ale Muhammad.
وآل محمد صلوات. آج رخصت ہو رہی ہے تم سے زہرا یا علی، آج رخصت ہو رہی ہے تم سے زہرا یا علی، پردہ شب میں میری میت اٹھانا یا علی، آج رخصت ہو رہی ہے تم سے زہرا یا علی، پسلیاں توڑی گئیں کیسے یہ بتلاؤں گی میں، حشر کے میدان میں بھی اس حال میں آؤں گی میں، ہاتھ پہلو سے نہ تم میرا ہٹانا یا علی، آج رخصت ہو رہی ہے تم سے زہرا یا علی، وہ مصیبت آپ نے اچھا ہوا دیکھی نہیں، اب میں سیدھے ہاتھ سے تسبیح پڑھ سکتی نہیں، ایسا قنفذ نے ہے مارا تازیانہ یا علی، آج آج رخصت ہو رہی ہے تم سے زہرا یا علی. کہتی ہے زینب یہ مجھ سے دیکھ کر چہرہ میرا، آپ کے رخسار پر یہ نیل ہے کیسا پڑا، میں نے کھایا ہے تماچا مت بتانا یا علی. آج رخصت ہو رہی ہے تم سے زہرا یا علی. تازیان کی اذیت کا اٹھانا ایک طرف، وہ تماچے قتل محسن در جلانا ایک طرف، سب سے مشکل تھا مگر در بار جانا یا علی. آج رخصت ہو رہی ہے تم سے زہرا یا علی. جب میری تلقین پڑھنا یاد کر لینا ذرا، در کے گرنے سے میرا بازو بھی ہے ٹوٹا ہوا، میرے شانوں کو ذرا دھیرے ہلانا یا علی. آج رخصت ہو رہی ہے تم سے زہرا یا علی. چاہے آ جائے قیامت مجھ سے یہ وعدہ کرو، جب تلک مولا میرے شبیر کی مرضی نہ ہو، تب تلک میرا جنازہ مت اٹھانا یا علی. آج رخصت ہو رہی ہے تم سے زہرا یا علی. اور محمد و آل محمد صلوات.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Amir, for that amazing recitation. Another loud salawat for the dear brother. Inshallah, at this time, I'd like to request Sister Rabah for recitation of poetry with the loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ale Muhammad.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Growing up, we would often hear the heart-wrenching poetry of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam at the grave of Lady Fatima. So this poem is what I imagine could have been the response of Lady Fatima salamullah alayh in response to her husband. This is called Farewell to the Beloved. In the garden of Baqi, on a dark and starless night, a lover bids farewell to his beloved noble wife. As he bathes her grave in tears and concludes his poetry, Perhaps Fatima responds to Amir al-Mu'mineen. O Ali, your tired eyes have witnessed so much pain, but my love, you must be patient for my Hasan and Hussein. Nurture my beloved sons to bear patiently their trials, and raise Zainab and Kulthum with the softest of your smiles. Prepare Zainab to be eloquent in the face of tyranny. Teach her to see beauty in every hardship, O Ali. Tell your secrets to the well when the world can't comprehend you. O Ali, remember me when your companions can't defend you. When my father left this world and the Ummah turned their backs, and our home became the focus of the enemy's attacks, I considered it my honor to remain standing at your side. What my khutbah left unspoken, let my anger testify. When my father named me Fatima, he marked my destiny as the one who separates the truth from vice and tyranny, the one who marks the separation between hell and paradise, the one who nourishes the truth and who annihilates the lies. I am the leader of the women of both paradise and earth, yet they denied my father's gift to me and falsified my words. What use have I for Fadak when every garden speaks my name? That explicit violation, their denial of my claim, will tell the story of our struggle and be marked in history, and Fatima's objections will be known eternally. When falsehood sought allegiance, Zahra did not submit. The pure essence of my soul would not allow me to acquit the people of Saqifa who took the right of God's wali and preferring their own logic did not submit to God's decree. They brought fire to our door, but I will set ablaze their lies. I will object to their betrayal in my life and my demise. They may conceal the sacred truth, but my allegiance can't be claimed. For no matter what they alter, my objection will remain. For the unity of men, you must be patient, my Ali. Let my words be your defense, they will live on in history. As a mark of our dissension and a reminder of the truth, in the depths of your aloneness, I will always be with you. Zahra would give her life for you, O Amir al-Mu'mineen. It breaks my heart to leave you, but in the realm of the unseen, I will always be with you, for separation cannot be between two souls like ours who are bound by God's decree. You are my spirit's only match, the sole possessor of my heart, and even death and tyranny cannot keep our souls apart. And when the poison tears the liver of my beloved Mujtaba, and the enemies engulf my Madloom Abdullah, Fatima will be there, for a mother's love can never die. In the marrow of her children's hearts, her soul remains alive. And someday when my Mahdi comes, he will avenge our pain. He will rid the world of darkness and seek vengeance for Hussein. O Ali, await that day and bear patiently this life. It was the honor of my being to have been your faithful wife. Of all the blessings I was given, your love I held most dear. But your work remains unfinished, for Abbas is not yet here. Clear the bramble from the field where they'll massacre my sons. Many chapters must unfold for this battle to be won. My beloved, do not grieve as you leave me in my grave, for eternity is ours and paradise awaits. With this, Ali arises as he lays his wife to rest, and he lifts the gate of Khaybar from the weight upon his chest. What suffering awaits him? How many people will betray him? How many battles will be waged by the people who portray him as an ordinary man, to be slandered, cursed, and fought? O Saqifa, cursed tree, what bitter fruits your branches wrought! From the broken heart of Fatima to the battle of Siffin and the sword of the assassin that killed Amir al-Mu'mineen and rained the arrows on Hassan and the spears upon Hussein, the family you were meant to love you met with only pain. Many chapters will be buried of what the Ahl Bayt endured, but the anger of Zahra will never be obscured, and until the day of judgment, the lovers' hearts will recognize that Haqq remained with Ahl Bayt as they lived and as they died. Salawat.
Jazakallah khair, Sister Ba, for that amazing recitation and imagery. For the dear sister, another loud salawat, please. Respected Sayyid, elders, brothers, and sisters of faith, Assalamu alaikum. Condolences to the Imam of our time on the tragedy that befell his holy grandmother. May Allah remove His mercy from the transgressors. Jazakallah Sayyid for accepting our invitation to address the community both yesterday and tonight. It's always a blessing to have you and to benefit from your knowledge. Although your trips are short, your knowledge that you impart does last. For the safety and inshallah the swift return for Sayyid to the CFK community, another last salawat please. Before I request Sayyid Hasan to ascend the member, just a few reminders. The Thanks to Allah potluck will be this Thursday. Registration closes tonight at 11:59 p.m. Another link was sent on WhatsApp. If you're planning to come with you, your loved ones, or your families and friends, please make sure to register so that we have an accurate count for food and other activities. Inshallah, please try to join. The program will begin at 12 p.m. with Salaat, followed by many activities including the unveiling of the Fatimiyyah wall, as well as welcoming families, the official unveiling of the Mawadda Cafe, and many more. Inshallah, for more details, please visit our WhatsApp. Please note that inshallah on Thursday there will be no Thursday program, as there will be an event all day. Friday there will be Salat al-Jum'ah led by Sheikh Mehdi Rastani with adhan at 12:16 p.m. Mawadda Cafe will be open from 1:15 to 2:30 p.m. The weekly Brothers Halakat that usually takes place on Friday evening will instead be taking place at 2 p.m. after Salat al-Jum'ah in the DYG lounge. This Saturday, inshallah, we will be continuing with Fajr and Tafakkur led by Sheikh Muhammad Al-Saadi, with the Fajr starting at 6:30 a.m. Mawadda Cafe will also be open from 6:45 to 7:45 a.m. Before I request the Sayyid to ascend the member for his speech tonight, I would like to request that we recite Surah Fatiha for the marhumin of tonight's program sponsors. Let us also include our own marhumin and mu'minat. At this time, I'd like to request Sayyid Hasan to ascend the member for his speech for tonight and request our brothers and sisters to move closer to the member with Allah salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين بالقاسم المصطفى محمد ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين وَلَعْنَةُ اللَّهِ عَلَىٰ أَعْدَائِهِمْ أَجْمَعِينَ مِنَ الْأَوَّلِينَ وَالْآخِرِينَ إِلَىٰ قِيَامِ يَوْمِ الدِّينِ أَمَّا بَعْدُ. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Thank you. Mu'mineen, mu'minat, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Salamun alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Last night, we took a different look at the tasbih of Sayyid Fatimah alayhi salam, and instead of looking at just the fada'il and the rewards and thawab and its method of recitation, other dimensions of it, we wanted to focus and hone in and open up the actual history of it, and specifically the story or one version of how it was gifted to her by Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. And Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And we saw that in the version that we looked at, which was narrated by Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. We looked at his perspective of him bringing up this issue and showing us what a wali, what a father, what a husband does for his household, how he looks at the holistic well-being of a home. Not just physically, not just financially, not just providing food and shelter and clothing, but making sure that the emotional and intellectual and spiritual well-being is also maintained by him as well for all of his family members. We looked at how he utilized his wisdom and his awareness, not just of the difficulty that Bibi Fatima was going through, but also that there were outside resources that were possibly available. Then he sent his wife, Bibi Fatima, to Rasulullah to make the request, right, for aid in the home through a maidservant. And then when, as we said, Bibi Fatima had noticed that Rasulullah had already been busy with something else, she decided to put her needs secondary and put the needs of the ummah ahead. And we took that as a reminder for ourselves that our centers, our masajid, organizations, we are supposed to be doing khidmah for them and not expect that everybody does work for us. So we need to sacrifice and swallow our pride, our ego, and our desires many times. And then finally, we looked at the perspective of Rasulullah himself, as he doesn't just cut off his daughter after she marries her off, right? That sometimes happens in households. That regardless of whether we are in-laws or actual parents and our children have been married off, we still maintain that connection, right? Not in the sense that we are nosy and we're picking on people and we're bullying them, nothing like that, but that we do have a concern for the well-being of our children, right? And that we maintain a relationship that's strong enough that if they do have a need, they should be able to come and communicate that need to us, right? And that's what we saw at the end. And not that just we fulfill the need, but we saw that Rasulullah said that, let me give you something even better than what you're asking for. And that's where the tasbih of Bibi Fatima came from. And the last point, as a reminder for us, was to not neglect and ignore the fact that although Bibi Fatima had been asking for physical assistance in terms of the duties in the household, it was the tasbih which Rasulullah said, this is better for you and it will aid you even more than what you're looking for. And we reminded ourselves of how all of these ad'i'a, all these du'as, zyarat, everything that we recite, all these metaphysical, spiritual, immaterial things, these are what dominate and define the physical realm for us. And sometimes we have flipped it around, we focus too much on the physical, on the material, on the dunya, and we think that that's what will help us out in the akhirah, when it's actually the other way around. When we focus on these higher level principles, on these spiritual things, on dua, ziyarat, ibadat in general, that's what should give us that strength, that tawakkul, that building up of iman that we need to carry out everything else. So that's just a quick summary of what we discussed last night. Now, for tonight, I wanted to go in a slightly different direction, with your permission. And I'm saying with your permission, I'm going to do it anyway. I don't really need your permission, obviously, but I have to say something, pretend to be humble, right? You know, when these occasions come, right, when we're speaking about the female personalities in Islam, it ends up being a very easy, call it excuse, or a good cause or reason to talk about the role of women in Islam, right? That's what happens. Although, yeah, we could talk about it any other time of the year, but okay, now seems more appropriate than any other time to do so, right? And I'm sure many of you are familiar with the various discussions that take place about the role of women in Islam and how it's been approached by speakers and ulama, how it's also been tackled and how it's a subject of attack by people who hate Muslims, use the word Islamophobes if you want. I'm not a fan of that word myself, but I understand why people would use that. People who are trying to object and criticize Islam, one of their main attacking points is the idea of, you Muslims, you don't put women, you put them below men, right? You're a misogynistic religion, and your ideas are misogynistic, etc. You oppress women, all these ideas. So what ends up happening is we get caught up in this crossfire. Sometimes we come up with these questions naturally, whether they're ahkam questions, why are there differences between men and women in some of these issues? Sometimes they're historical questions that we might have. And other times maybe we're not bothered by anything personally, but because now a friend, a colleague, a classmate, maybe even a family member who might be, curious or maybe even shaky in their iman and deen, they come and ask us, like, well, why would Islam allow this? It doesn't make sense. Why does Islam treat women like this? Or, just tell me in general, how does Islam deal with women? Because it doesn't seem like it's very good. So we get caught up in that. We try our best with whatever we might have read or learned or heard from, the minbar. We try to use those as responses. And sometimes they're sufficient, sometimes they're satisfactory. But given probably the recent socio-political climate, a lot of those answers that may have worked in the East or maybe worked 20, 30, 40 years ago, they maybe don't work anymore, right? Or maybe they work to a certain degree, but we're looking for something a bit deeper now, right? So sometimes that happens when it comes to these issues. And when we suffer from this doubt or this shak, or these ambiguities, if we leave them alone, meaning we don't go out and actively try to solve them, actively find the answers, what ends up happening is that small little tear in the fabric of our wujud or our deen and our iman, it starts to, right, even though it's a small tear because it's one or two questions, the next question that comes or the next doubt that comes rips it a bit more. And then I get more and more doubts and it rips more and more and more. And then that causes laziness in my practice sometimes too. Right? A lot of people ask, sometimes I find myself lazy in my practice, or I try to convince my children to, whether it's observe hijab or to pray or read Quran, all these things, and I see that they don't want to do it. Or maybe I don't want to do it. Or I'm lazy about it. I don't have enthusiasm towards it. And so we try to answer those specific issues, right? Okay, let's just tackle those things. That's what the problem is. Normally, the issue is something a bit more fundamental, right? There's something about aqeedah or something philosophical that's leading to me not wanting to actually go and pray. Meaning, even though we find a lot of issues in the furu' ad-din, the so-called branches, ahkam and legal issues and all this, it's typically sourced in what? Usul ad-din. It's some issue that I might have with God, with Allah, with the Quran, with His justice, with the concept of nubuwah or imama or wilaya or the afterlife, ma'ad, something. Or one of these subcategories of usul ad-din and aqaid. And because I don't understand that clearly, that's going to affect the way that I practice. It's going to affect my ibadah. It's going to affect the furu' ad-din. We try to solve it with the furu', but it doesn't work out. Right? If it's a fundamental issue, I have to solve those first and foremost. Right? It's a natural sort of progression. So what do we want to talk about for tonight? Well, the first thing I want to do is to just go over some of the ways that these questions have been answered before, very quickly, and then offer perhaps a different take and a different approach, which may not hit the questions head on, but it'll hopefully provide us with a different type of framework we can use when approaching these questions in the future. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So, people are coming, or we're thinking, how do I conceptualize and think about these issues of, women in Islam, women's role in the deen, the Quranic explanation, what do I think about this? So, especially when critics come, what is one style of response? One way is, especially when someone comes and they say that Islam oppresses women, it doesn't give them rights, chauvinistic, etc., misogynistic, patriarchal, all of these things. One of the types of responses that certain speakers, authors, and ulama give, and many we probably heard too, is this historical response, right? It's a comparative historical response, meaning what? They say, look at the nature of women in societies back then. Look at how the women were treated in the Jahiliyyah, the Jahil Arab society, and then see the rights that Islam came and gave to them. right? That they have no right to property before, Islam gave them that. They had no right to for mahr before, the dowry before, Islam came and gave them that, right? They didn't before Islam, they didn't need to give their permission to get married, but Islam said no, you have to get the permission of the girl to get married, right? All these things. So it's a very sort of historical reactionary response. That all these societal ills were there, all these lack of rights were there, and Islam came and gave all the women these rights, right? That's one style of response we see. Or they'll talk about other issues that, right, in Arab society, as many of us know, because women didn't provide value to the society, because they were a war, a tribalistic warfare type of society. They were just looking for resources constantly and fighting with one another. So for that society, women are of no use because they cannot be soldiers. They can't go out and fight. They're not going to go and serve, the tribe well. So when that's one of the reasons why they would get so sad when they had daughters. They said, this is not adding to us at all. And in fact, once this daughter gets married off, we're losing out in our tribe. So that's why they would want men, because we need to increase the size of our soldiers, our platoon, right? Things like that. It was just all about, warfare. That was in their minds. So this is why, as many of us know, this is where this female infanticide came from. Many of them said, there's no point. This is a disgrace and a dishonor to our family, so we'll just, bury these, babies alive. And of course, Islam came and forbade, right, and spoke highly against that practice. And then all these other issues about ownership, property, right? I don't want to go into all of them, but I think you know this style of response, right? That, well, I'll show you the lack of rights they had, and then I'll show you how Islam came and fixed it, right? That's the idea. So that's one way that people have tried to respond. Now, of course, that will solve maybe some issues, but it doesn't really give us a clear picture. Okay, but what is the role of women in Islam, though? That's not helping us. It's answering a few issues, sure, and Islam definitely changed the nature and status of women. Okay, we don't deny that, but there's still a lot of questions that are left. There's still what some people would say, okay, there still seems to be something that's unequal, right, at the end of the day, right? So how would that answer? And the historical response is not really going to solve that issue necessarily, right? The next type, or the next way that the discussion takes place, or the way that people kind of go back and forth, is when they get very specific in the issues themselves, right? So they don't necessarily care about the history. They want an answer for every injustice or oppressive issue in Islam that they see. And the top of it is what? Hijab, obviously, right? That's what everybody has. The main issue that they bring up is hijab, right? This is not correct because women have to do it and men don't. That's the main thing. And why do you have to make them cover up, right? So that's one issue that's brought up. And of course, there have been responses given over time too by our speakers. And typically they talk about the idea of objectification. That Islam, in prescribing the hijab for women, removes this idea of objectification. Right, so that a person is able to look beyond the physical. That's the idea. So, okay, fine. What about if a society had ever gotten to a point where there's maybe very little or no objectification? If that's the reasoning people are using, then okay, then does that mean hijab is like over now? Because nobody's objectifying women anymore? If that's the reason we're offering, then, well, we offered a societal solution, so you don't need to cover up anymore. What's the big deal? Or the responses sometimes these Islamophobes and other critics and Orientalists give is that, well, maybe that's how society was back then, but we've progressed now, we don't have that issue anymore. Or they'll give another example. They say, but all of your Muslim societies, there's still disgusting sort of predatory habits that take place over there. And some of them argue even more so. Like, okay, so how is your hijab fixing all of that? And there's even a deeper response to this as well too, that we would give. We'd say, even if you want to bring up all this physical objectification stuff, this is not speaking to how this is dealing with the actual higher level role of women in society. Like, how is this helping out? What does hijab have to do with what Allah's view of a woman should be in Islam, in a society? That's not telling us anything there. Right? So there's something that's missing. And one of the ways we can understand that is, if hijab was all about this sort of physical and material, then why would it be prescribed and wajib for a woman if she was by herself praying? Right? When a female is by herself, nobody else around, and she's offering salah, does she have to observe hijab? Yeah, she does. Even if there's zero people around and there's not even a fear that anybody will come, she'll still have to do it. So, okay, where's the physical sort of scare there? It's just now her and Allah, that's it. So how can this be just relegated to the physical dimension? It's impossible. And this is where now some of the ulama come and say, look, you can offer some of these physical, scientific answers if you want, but you're always going to be left wanting. There's always going to be something that's missing. You might be able to satisfy a part of the inquisition and the curiosity, sure, but then somebody might come and push you a little bit more, or I might see that, no, there's got to be something deeper to this. There has to be something else. And this is where those who are more into, quote-unquote, the aqliyat, whether it's metaphysics or philosophy, irfan, Sufism, any of these things, they say this is where they will offer something that speaks to the real, inherent, deeper value of what women are. Right? So that's hopefully the idea we want to now approach things. Now, there's a few other side issues I wanted to go through, but just for, out of the sake for time, I'll leave some of these aside, right? Because there are other issues in the Quran that Islamophobes and even some Muslims, they see some of these ayat, and they say these are really confusing, it's very hard to understand, right? And they'll question these. But if I go through every one of them, it may be difficult for us to understand. If we have time at the end, maybe we'll go back and try to offer some quick responses to them if possible. But for now, let's go back to our kind of essential idea and step back, and instead of just being reactionary, what kind of framework do we want to use and develop to try to now approach some of these issues? Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So there are different levels and layers to how far or how deep we can go in trying to build a framework and answer these things, right? Some will stop and say, right? Like, okay, the reason why there's going to be different rules and different laws is because men and women are different, which I know in the society is apparently controversial to say, but physiologically it's obvious. It should be obvious, I hope, right? But even if somebody accepts that, they say, fine, let's just accept, say Salaam, na fine, we accept that there's differences and maybe that might lead to different laws, sure. But why was it created like this in the first place? Right? Because we can take a step back and say, then why make two of them? Why make male and female in the first place? We created you as male and female. Allah says it very clearly multiple times. So He has an irada, He has an intention for why He's doing this. Allah doesn't do anything haphazardly. There's nothing that's lahu and vain just because He feels like it. No, there's a reason for this. So the first part of it is to step back and say, not why there are differences in the ahkam or the laws and things like that. Say, hold on, why is there a difference in the first place? Why even create two genders? Where'd that come from? What's the purpose behind all of that? There has to be something. And we can go in that direction, and inshallah, if we have time, we'll do that. But, actually, let me stop here, and then we'll come back to another point. How do other people respond to this first, right? It's good for us to keep that in mind. The typical response that they would give in a modern society, right? We're looking for the typical scientific, empirical response that most people are looking for. Okay, because we would push it back to, let's say, an atheist if they're asking us. Okay, you tell us, why are there differences? Why is there two genders, right? What's going on? And they'd say, okay, it's for evolution. That's the point, right? In order to create this idea of genetic variation and to push this idea of certain types of mutations, you need to have the spreads of variants within two different types so that it can combine differently as evolution takes place, right? I'm not giving you like the full answer here, I'm just giving you just like the cliff notes. They have to explain it in terms of genetic variation and evolution and how it's evolutionary beneficial for human beings to do that, right? To split up certain things so that certain dominant traits are able to pass through and certain recessive bad traits will not come through. There's some idea like that. Whereas other organisms that only have, quote unquote, one gender, right? That just can clone themselves and reproduce like that. For them, it's okay, if there's a certain defect there, it'll just pass through the whole time. So that's one reason at least they'll give. They'll say, okay, this is the issue here. It's for physical, call it superiority, or to try to protect the evolution and the lineage of human beings from an evolutionary perspective. That's the way that they'll answer. Say, okay, fine, that's yours. Now we say, okay, but what about us? Do we have a Quranic perspective that's going to give us, some sort of response here? There's nothing necessarily in the Quran directly that's addressing why there's men and women. You don't really have that. But the Quran is inviting us to step back a bit, take one step back first. right? To be a bit more philosophical about it. In order for me to figure out what is the purpose of having male humans and female humans, I've got another question to ask. Okay, well, what is the actual purpose of human beings in the first place? If I can figure out the purpose of insan and human beings, then that'll show me why there's going to need to be some differentiation between the two. There has to be two different versions of them, so to speak. And now, this answer, hopefully, we should know, right? Why are we created? What's our purpose? What are we made for? Well, why are we here? The Quran tells us very clearly, right? Surah Dhariyat, Surah 56, Ayah 61. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسِ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. The only reason that we created jinn and insan, human beings, is what? لِيَعْبُدُونَ. So that you do ibadah. That's it. Now, for those who have hopefully paid attention and read the translation there, because you would not pick this up unless you actually read the translation. Even though it ends with إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, so that you worship, there technically should be a ya at the end of that word. Right? It should be يَعْبُدُونِي, so that you worship me. Allah is saying that the only reason you've been created is that you worship me. Most of you who have studied some bit of Arabic, you know, anytime you want to add the first person possessive to any word in Arabic, you add a ya at the end, right? So if kitab is book, how do you say my book? Kitabi, right? That's it. Right? So when Rasulullah is talking about his Ahl Bayt, Ahl Bayti, right? Something like that. So over here, it's the same thing when you're using verbs as well, at least in this context. إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونِي is that Allah's saying, so that they worship me. Now there's a reason why it's cut off. And in order for me to explain that, would probably take another lecture. So I just want you to think about it, that there is a ya there, that's there, it's cut off. And there are reasons why we know that there is a ya that's cut off, but I'll leave the grammatical discussion for some other time. Anyway, I want us to remember that it's not just saying that we're created to worship. It's Allah saying, I created you, human beings and jinn, but we don't care about them for now. I created you, insan, to worship me. Great. So now, what is my idea of ibadah? Okay, ibadah means praying and fasting and reading Quran and giving charity. Like, okay, that's why you made me, Allah, right? Just to do all this stuff. Like, okay, no, that's not ibadah, right? We should know better that, no, there's a higher level of ibadah. And yes, the ashab and the companions, they knew that there's got to be a deeper definition of this, a deeper tafsir of this word. So when they ask Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam about this, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And the other Ahlul Bayt as well, the other Ma'sumin, they say this ya'buduni means what? Ya'ni liya'rifuni. This ibadah is actually talking about ma'rifah. So the only reason that we have been created is to gain ma'rifah of Allah. That's the only reason we've been created. So there's a connection now between ma'rifah and ibadah. So now we have to put these two together and then see how this links to the discussion of male and female. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So, what does this idea of ma'rifah have to do with anything? All right, created for ma'rifah. Ma'rifah meaning what? To know Allah, to get to know who He is. Okay, does that mean that I have to know that, okay, that means Allah ek, there's one God, and there's a bunch of names He has, I have to memorize those, and these things Allah can't be, and is that it? Is that knowing Allah? No, it's deeper than that. Allah is infinite perfection. You all agree with that definition or that explanation, right? Infinite perfection, right? Okay. Keep that in the back of your minds. When we talk about this idea of the reason for creation, there's two different perspectives or two different ways you can answer a question like that, right? When you're talking about the reason for something's creation, you can look at it from the perspective of the object, like the thing that is being created, and then you can also look at it from the perspective of the creator, right? Or the doer, if you're talking about a certain action. So I'll give an example. If we say, what is the purpose of a school or sending kids to school, right? Everybody says, all right, a school is there to give kids an education, right? To teach them things, that's it, that's the point. But now you go back to the parents and say, okay, the school, the purpose of the school is to educate, to inculcate, to raise children, whatever it is, right? That's the purpose of the school. But what was your actual reason and purpose for sending them to school? Some of them might say education. Some might say, I just wanted like 5 hours apiece, or 8 hours apiece. That's all I care about, right? They don't care about the educational part. So it's possible sometimes that there might be a lack of being in sync between the reason for creation of the creation itself and the actual person who's doing the action. And this actually does apply in this situation too. Allah is saying, your purpose, insan, is ma'rifah. That is your purpose. That's different than what Allah's specific irada and His intention happens to be as well too. So that's another discussion. I want you to put a kind of on a question mark, a comma, semicolon, upside down question mark. I'm not sure what exclamation, I'm not sure which one to use right now. Use some punctuation mark, I'm not sure which one, right? But do something, right? Just pause it and put it in your pocket. Do something like that, okay. So, we're created to gain ma'rifah of Allah, okay. When we say, if you ask us though, like an average person, what is your actual goal in life? Now, not going by the Quran. If you ask somebody honestly, what do you actually want to achieve? And you can answer as a proper Muslim. You say, look, I'm trying to get to Jannah. At the end of the day, that's what I want. I want to go to paradise, right? And all the blessings that come with it, that's what I'm looking for. I don't want to even see, touch, taste, smell. I don't want to be anywhere near hellfire, right? My destination, my goal is Jannah. It's paradise. That's it, right? Okay, fine. So here, this is where now all these various questions and answers about creation come together. Allah is saying, I created you for ibadah. The tafsir, the explanation is, ibadah, we mean ma'rifah. Like, okay, fine. So we're created for ma'rifah of Allah. And in trying to give us this idea of ma'rifah, what happens? Allah in the Quran is explaining all this stuff about Jannah and Jahannam, obviously, right? Rather than explaining clearly what ma'rifah means, Allah goes a different direction, right? Throughout the Quran, what is it? It's descriptions of Jannah and Jahannam. That's what's going on. They call it, is this different or is it the same? And that's what many of us, right, maybe given our levels, that's what we're looking for. Okay, if you're explaining all this stuff, Ya Allah, in the Quran, all these rivers flowing with this drink and all these blessings and these palaces and gems and all this, okay, then yeah, that sounds good. That's what I want and I'll work towards doing that. Fine. But what does that have to do with ma'rifah? Or the question that even kids have themselves is, but Allah, if you wanted us to just have ma'rifah and then make our way to Jannah, why didn't you just do that from the beginning? Like, why didn't you just put us there? If the purpose of creation was your ma'rifah, and let's just say the goal or that the effect of that ma'rifah leads us to Jannah, then, well, Allah, why'd you put all these weird steps of the dunya in the first place? Like, just put us there. Just put us in Jannah directly. Well, what's the point of this? Like, it would have saved us hassle, obviously. The ma'rifah you could have just put into us too. And then the example that people give is that, okay, are there other creations that just do ibadah without question? Because that's what Allah is asking for and that's what He wants. They just know and recognize Allah. Are there creations like that? What creations just do pure ibadah? Angels. So, and that's what, I've had many kids ask the same thing, and I'm sure many of us have the same question. Allah, why not just make us angels then? If your whole point is just ibadah, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for us to recognize you. Well, you already have a creation that's doing that. What's the point of us then? It seems like there's a difference then in function and goal. Like there seems to be a break over here. Something's wrong. A disconnection. A mismatch. If you wanted ibadah, Allah, you wanted ma'rifah, you already did that. You made these angels. They do that. All they do is your ibadah. They're forced to. They have no other choice. All they have is ma'rifah of you. There's nothing else that they have. They're pure nur or aql, whatever you want to call it. That's all they can do. So why not just do that for us? Why not just make us that? They said, well, this is where now the concept of free will gets tied into the discussion, right? What makes us different than angels, obviously, is the concept of free will. And this concept of free will is what actually gives this sort of flavor and meaning to the whole concept of ma'rifah and to Jannah and Jahannam in the first place. Let me explain after salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. If we ask an angel when they're performing ibadah, do you know what you're doing when you're doing ibadah? What kind of answer do you think they would give? There are angels that all they do is ruku. There are some angels, all they do is sujood. There are some angels that are just doing a tasbih, some version of tasbih. That's it. If you stop them and ask them, are you enjoying what you're doing? Do you have any idea what exactly you're doing? What do you think they would answer? How do you and I come to actually understand things in the first place? How do we benefit from things? How do we understand that? So, let me give some examples. Think of your favorite dish, right? Favorite food. I'm going to go with filet mignon, obviously, right? Medium rare. Now, if it was up to me, I would love to just eat it constantly, right? Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I'm sure, right, especially when we're in more of a childlike, immature state, that favorite food that we have, we just want to eat it all the time. Once we mature a little bit, then we realize, actually, that's probably a bad idea. Why is that? We get tired of it, right? Why does that favorite food or drink or dessert, whatever, why does it actually taste good to us in the first place? Why do we have that feeling of good taste? Why? Because I've got something to compare it to, right? I know what a good steak tastes like. Why? Because I've had bad steak before, right? Let me give another example. When those of you who like nature, right? Apparently you guys just did a hike recently, right? Something like that. When some people go out and they're able to just look at a sunrise or a sunset, look at mountains, look at flowers, all these beautiful things in creation. And they can say, subhanallah, mashallah, see how beautiful it is. Well, why is that? It's because you can see some nasty, disgusting things too, and you see that there's clearly a difference, right? You ever been to, let's say, Times Square, right? Anywhere in New York? I don't want to offend any New Yorkers here, but it's disgusting, right? It's not a beautiful place to look at. You go to rundown like places like that, you see there's a huge, huge difference. So the reason I'm able to benefit from and understand that there's beauty out there is because I can recognize that there's ugliness too. I can see that. The reason why, let's say, a certain bed or a fabric will feel good to me and make me feel comfortable is why? Because I understand the idea of discomfort too. I know what it feels to be in a state of discomfort so that I now know also what it feels to be comforted as well. Yeah, so I think you get the pattern over here too. There's a concept that they discuss in philosophy that تُعْرَفُ أَشْيَاء بِأَضْدَادِهَا, that things are recognized and they're truly understood by what? By their opposites. That's the only way you can truly understand something. The only way you and I have a conception of light is why? Because we understand what? Dark. The only reason why we can feel cold is because we can feel hot, right? So you get the idea. Short, tall, knowledge, ignorance. All these things exist as opposites. Right? Call it a spectrum if you want, whatever you want to call it. There exists these scales, these gradations. And it's because of that, because of our knowledge of that, that is where ma'rifah is actually built. Ma'rifah is a deep recognition of the complete essence of something. That's what it is. An angel, someone that's just force-fed these ideas, has no conception of these things at all. So before when I quickly just moved past the point, but when we say, oh, angels have ma'rifah, right? No, they don't. Angels do not have this ma'rifah. Why? Because an angel, while it's just there doing sujood all the time, or doing ruku all the time, or reading Quran, whatever they're doing, do they know what it feels like or what it's like to not do that? They have no idea. They have no conception. Do they understand that feeling of going for ziyarah, landing, seeing the haram, having that, those heart palpitations sometimes you get when you're there, that tranquility, the calmness? They have no idea of these feelings. When people say that, Jannah is in Karbala, the angels don't know what that means. They have no conception of that whatsoever. But you and I do, because we've seen everything other than Karbala, so we have a value to Karbala now, right? So because we can see and feel and understand opposites, that's how ma'rifah is engaged. So now we come back to all this idea of purpose. Like, okay, so why not just make us angels? Because Allah said it's not just about ibadah. The explanation was what? It's ma'rifah, not just ibadah. Real ibadah has to lead to ma'rifah. The ibadah of angels doesn't lead to any ma'rifah because they don't know anything else. They cannot perform anything else. They're robots, that's all they are. Not, I don't want to reference what I talked about before, right? Not these random robots that you see nowadays. They're just programmed to just do ibadah, that's it. But we, because of that factor, that tool of free will, we now have two choices. There's one choice which is ibadah. It is this path to Allah. It's the path of ma'rifah. Or I can say, no, I'd rather go in the other direction. I'd rather not do ibadah. I don't want any ma'rifah. I don't want anything to do with Allah. Or, another way, when we just said before that Allah is what? Is infinite perfection. In order for me to gain ma'rifah of infinite perfection, I need to see and feel the opposite as well too. So Allah then, in order for us to understand that, He says, I have to put you in a place where the exact opposite is going to exist. So if Allah is infinite perfection, then I have to show you what imperfection looks like too. Otherwise, you'll never recognize me. If you want to understand the goodness that exists, that is the essence of Allah, that pure khair, the only way to really understand that is what? To see shar and to see evil, and this is the place where evil can take place. It can't take place anywhere else. So Allah says, I have to put you here. In order for you to gain my ma'rifah, you have to be able to go through these battles and these stages and to go through thick and thin, but all these things. This struggle, this toil, all of this is actually what gains and builds ma'rifah in you and I. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. We can only truly recognize, connect with, and have this qurbah and closeness to Allah if we also know what it feels like to be away from Allah as well too. And that's a main topic they talk about in Islamic metaphysics. And in Christian theology they talk about the fall of man, right? The fall of Adam, the fall of man. We have this same sort of idea, although we don't have original sin obviously, but we do have this idea where we have hubut, they call it. We've descended. We've been sent down from these higher levels, just like our ancestor, Nabi Adam and Bibi Hawa, alayhim wassalam. They descended from that higher plane to this lower plane, and now we are carrying on that same sort of descent on that higher plane. Now what is our job? We've come down, and what do we have to do? We go back up. And now there's two ways that you can do that. There's two ways we can make this ascent back up. One way is to be forced. And when does that forced ascent come back? كُلُّ نَفْسٍ ذَائِقَةُ الْمَوْتِ. Allah says, okay, if you don't want to come back to me of your own accord, your own volition, and use your free will and gain closeness to me, then you're going to come back anyway, but it's going to be forced on you at the time of death. But there's another way to do it too. That other way is if you actually, and we engage in this ibadah, that closest to Allah right now, and we ascend our souls, that mi'raj, that's what we're looking for. Right? And they call this Qaws al-Su'udi, right? This spiritual ascension. That's what all this stuff is talking about. Or as it's mentioned in the riwayat, mutu qabla an tamutu. Die that spiritual death so you can ascend before your physical death happens. This is what these riwayat are perhaps trying to engage in. All this is talking about ma'rifah. All this is talking about what our purpose is and what we are trying to achieve in this life. Or, to put it very succinctly, and I don't think it's been put better, I've never seen any other quote that puts it so nicely. It actually came from a Gatorade commercial in the maybe 90s, I think. All right, sorry, I'm revealing my age now, but yeah. And in this commercial, it said very, very clearly, to get to heaven, you got to go through hell. I was like, man, that's some wisdom right there. And obviously the commercial was just people like running and playing soccer and sweating, but for us it means something, a lot more significant, hopefully, right? Is that in order for us to give meaning to Jannah in the first place, like we're after all these things in Jannah, fine. All these things which are supposed to give us happiness and pleasure in Jannah, how would I be able to understand that unless I know what pain feels like over here? An angel in heaven is not going to have they're not going to understand what to do with it. They don't know what it is. But you and I, having understood the difficulty, the pain, the discomfort, all of this of the dunya, now the akhirah, Jannah, all of that gets meaning. But this is also, now this will take us a different conversation. This is also why there are different levels of heaven as well too. There are some of us who say, okay, that's what I'm after. I want Jannah, I want all of those things, Allah, that you mentioned in the Quran, right? The drinks and the servants that are going around and the, these couches that you have and the palaces, I want all of that. So Allah says, fine, if you want a dunyawi akhirah, then I'll give that to you, no problem. It's the bottom level of Jannah, but you can have that. That's fine, that's good. And inshallah, hopefully at least we get that. We better, right? We're Shias, we better get something like that. Bare minimum, we should get that. But there are others that Allah says, I'm not going to directly address them in the Quran, but if you read and go through my Ahlul Bayt, you'll see some of these deeper, more subtle points. Do we think that the Ahlul Bayt are doing their ibadah? Everything they're doing is just so they can get to Jannah, so they can enjoy the pleasures of Jannah? No. They are there just for the pure sake of getting to Allah, that's it. Right? As Imam Mahdi says, the only reason I worship Allah is just because He deserves the worship, that's it. There's no other reason. Even if you toss away and throw away all concepts of Jannah and paradise, and you guarantee that I'll go to hellfire, it's not going to change my ibadah at all. This is what Mawla Ali says. For us, as Shias who are trying to improve as well too, when we're thinking about how we are growing, is our idea that we want this, bottom level of heaven, which is fine, nothing wrong with that. Or are we saying, you know what, if I'm in this bottom level of heaven, which I know will give me this distance and bu'd from the Ahlul Bayt, is that really Jannah or not? If I know that the Ma'sumin are going to be at the highest levels, and as some riwayat indicate, it'll take thousands of years just to go and do their ziyarah. Right? That bottom level of Jannah now is almost like hell. If I'm going to Jannah, I don't need any of these physical things. I want to have a house next to Fatimiyyah Zahra, Imam Sadiq, Hazrat Abbas. That's what I want. I don't want all these physical things. So in order for me to get to a level of heaven like that, a Jannah like that, I need to have my ibadah match up to their level as well. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So this was about this idea of purpose. Now, just to quickly connect it to how we have to go back, right? This was the idea of why insan is created. Okay, but what does this have to do with the idea of men and women, right? That's what we initially started with. Why men and women then? Well, I don't have time for too many different analogies. If it was possible for insan to understand these things themselves, then Allah would have just made one version of us and that would have been fine. But what is necessary for ma'rifah? What did we just say? What do you need to have true recognition of something? Light and dark, right? Tall, short. You need opposites. You need different polarities. You need different ends of the spectrum, so to speak. So you need dhakar and untha. You need two different poles and polarities that are just manifestations of Allah. That's it. And this is where, as I'm sure many of you have heard it before, when we think about the Asma al-Husna, one of the frameworks that's given to us by the ulama is that there are Jalali names, and then there are Jamali names. There are names of these might, majesty, and power, which are referred to as masculine names of Allah, which men more readily, typically more easily manifest. And then there are the Jamali names, which are these names of beauty, which females, generally speaking, more easily manifest. So when we talk about Rahma, right? Rahimiyyah, all of these qualities of forgiveness, Ghafur, Latif, being subtle. These are Jamali qualities. And we talk about Al-Razaq, Al-Muntaqim, Al-Hafiz, right? The protector. All these very zahiri physical ones, they more, easily manifest in a male. And it's us both, as best as we can, trying to manifest these names. And then what happens? I can only achieve a certain part of my deen by myself, right? I can't get all the names by myself. I only got 50% of the puzzle, right? You guys know Double Dragon? Two brothers, they had two. Sorry, I got it's a weird reference. But it's like two halves of a puzzle, and then what do the Ahlul Bayt say? An-nikah nisfuddin. That marriage, then what? It completes your deen. This is one of the reasons why we only have one version of marriage compared to how people in the West think of it differently. There's a reason for that. Because for us, it's not about physical and identity and love. Like, okay, that stuff is different. We're talking about from a metaphysical principle, we have to bring these names of Allah together in one household. So that both of them can together become Insanul Kamil. These Jamali names need to come together with the Jalali names. And then my wife acts as a mirror of Allah's names, and I can see this and start to reflect it myself. My wife then sees whatever Jalali names I'm able to reflect. And then together, as we raise a household, we're able to inculcate this into our children. This is what a household looks like. This is how Kamal is reached. And this is one of the reasons how our ulama, those are into philosophy, Irfan, Sufism, this is how they explain the differences. They say, this is not about physical evolution and biology. Like, no, they don't care about any of that. This is not about physical survival. This is about spiritual survival. So it's necessary as a part of this framework of ma'rifah, of ibadah, for there to be the names split between two and then come together in a household. And that's why Rasulullah also says what? If someone does not go out for this nikah, they're not a part of me. They're not following my sunnah. This is a big thing. It's not wajib, which is very interesting. Why? Because we have certain exceptions, obviously, of course. But it's so important that it's going to be nearly impossible for anybody to actually grow spiritually unless they can find that spiritual counterpart. It's not going to happen. There might be rare cases otherwise, but no, we need this other counterpart. So now when you start to see this in a more holistic fashion, you can start to now look back at the ahkam with this. Why there's a division of labor. The Jalali names, being very physical, being very zahiri, need to be out more in the dunya. This is why the obligation of work and income and protection comes on men, not on women. Because it's not a part of those names. Is it haram for women to do that? No, it's not. But it's not their obligation. That's not the first and foremost thing that they have to manifest. But when we talk about lutf and rahmah and love and forgiveness, this is a normal style of manifestation for females, for women. That's the idea. And this is why certain other ideas, I'll mention one and then we'll move on to the masayib. These other names are also known as al-zahir and al-batin. That the male names are known as these exoteric, physical ones, but the female names are known as these batini ones. Now, what happens? How does something become batin, become hidden? It has to be covered. So then, which of these two genders is going to cover up to manifest that batini aspect? It's not going to be the male, it's going to be the female. It's there not to, maybe at one level about the physical stuff, sure, but that's not the ultimate peak goal. The idea is that it's a representation of that asma, or the names, that batini feature that exists within women. That in order for now this woman to connect with Allah, even in her salah, when she's by herself and it's just Allah, that hijab that's being put on is supposed to manifest and remind her of that batini connection that she has to Allah. And you know how sometimes we always say in a very cliched fashion, oh, the genders are equal, we're all the same, it's about your taqwa. And in general, yeah, that is the case. But many, let me not say many, there are certain schools of thought in Islam, usually within the Sufis and Urafa, who say, actually, that's not correct. Sorry, guys. But they say, actually, females are the better gender. Because at the end of the day, okay, although, yeah, physical protection and risk and all this is necessary, sure, but what are we always after? We want rahmah. We want forgiveness. All those names that we're all going after all the time, they more easily manifest and are part and parcel of the wujud of a woman, not a man. Now, our job is to try to manifest it, obviously, but it comes from there. And the idea of rahmah, of life, of all this, is coming from the female too. So all these higher level qualities are coming there. Now again, I'm just the messenger. I'm just bringing this stuff. You want to disagree with the Urafa and the Sufis? That's your right. You can do that. But I think it becomes very, very clear that why so many people see that societies can be built and thrive and survive because of women is the same reason why they can also crumble because of women. Not out of any patriarchal, misogynistic, chauvinistic reason. It's because of the power that's inherent with them. That's why, in many societies, it's the queens who are whispering to these kings and either causing the collapse of that empire and kingdom or causing it to rise and succeed. The success of Ali is impossible without the success and the ability of Fatima. This is why these two are put together. Right? Okay, I don't want to go on too much more. Probably already over time. Sorry, there's a few other points I wanted to go into, but kind of harbored on a few of these ideas. Before we move on to the Messiah, I just wanted to thank the community again for their kind invitation. It's always a pleasure and an honor to be here to serve this community. We pray for your continued success, inshallah. If anything was said in any of these 2 nights that was beneficial, then we thank Allah for being able to benefit from His words and His Ahlul Bayt and the teachings that have been passed down by our ulama. And if there has been anything that was said which was incorrect or not explained properly, then all that comes from me, and I ask for your forgiveness in that regard. And inshallah, we hope that we can maybe serve you again in the future. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. One more salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. This is why, even for us to gain ma'rifah of the Ahlul Bayt, the masa'ib amongst the male and female members of the Ahlul Bayt is not the same. Even there's differences. We mentioned last night how Bibi Fatima's grief begins with the loss of her mother, Khadija, and how Rasulullah was requested by Bibi Khadija to keep Fatima very, very close to him because of how difficult it was going to be for Fatima to lose her mother at such a young age. And then we recalled how soon then Bibi Fatima's grief increased when she lost Rasulullah. And the occasions of her heartbreaking when Rasulullah was departing the world, but then the smile that came on her face when Rasulullah whispered to her that soon you will come back to me as well. You will join me in Jannah. You'll be the first one to come back to me very soon. But what of the children? What of the status of the ummah at that time? Bibi Fatima had to deal with betrayal throughout her life over and over and over again. When she was a young girl, she sees how people are throwing stones and garbage on her father, how they have abandoned her mother. She sees how even after they accept Islam, how these munafiqeen over and over again betray Rasulullah, how they disobey him, how they question him, how they insult him. And she has to bear it as much as possible, but it's breaking her heart. And then after the passing of Rasulullah, now she sees the continued khiyanat of the Muslims in abandoning Amir al-Mu'mineen. And she is at the forefront with Amir al-Mu'mineen going door to door, telling the Ahl Medina and all these so-called Muslims, what happened to that bay'ah that you gave at Ghadir? What was going on with you? Why were you there at Saqifa? Why didn't you speak up on behalf of our master, our Mawla Ali? What is this? This is because only a handful of people supported them after this fact. Her words against the Zalimeen, the oppressors, as she goes into the Darbar and tells them and orders them that no, this fadak belongs to me. This is mine. This is what a true servant and someone with true ma'rif of Allah does. And she knows that her duty, even though normally, yes, as a woman, she's supposed to manifest these batini traits, but she says, because of the betrayal of the ummah, I'm now forced to come out and show myself in front of everyone. To show how the Jalal of Fatima will come out in front of these people. And this was done for a very specific reason, because in history, people can deny things from Amir al-Mu'mineen, they can deny his right, they can deny the history, but none of them can ever deny the things that Fatima had done. They cannot deny fadak, they cannot deny her khutbah, and they cannot deny the fact that these munafiqeen came to her house, that they threatened her, that they screamed at her, and they said, now burn this house down. And when these individuals, so-called Muslims, said, but the daughter of Rasulullah is present in the house, he said, so what? Burn the house down with her inside. It didn't matter that Fatima was there. It didn't matter whether she was pregnant or not. These mal'oon didn't care about the bid'ah, the bad'ah, the peace of Rasulullah. This is what Fatima had to deal with. After the attack takes place on the home, they say she's now recovering, trying her best to recover, but these are fatal wounds that were inflicted on her. They say that maybe she lasted 40 days. And imagine this kind of pain that she would have had to endure. But instead of her trying to rest more, instead of her trying to take it easy, they say that she increased her ibadah. She took care of Hassan and Hussein even more because she knew that her time was coming to an end soon. So she would spend even more time. Some riwayat mentioned that she would spend even more time going and not just sitting and preparing food for Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein, and Zayd ibn Kulthum, but she would now go and feed them with her own hands because she knew that these hands will be gone very soon and won't be able to touch her children anymore. She used to be ahlid namaz al-shab, salatul layl, but as that weakness became more and more in her, then they say that now she started to lean now on the side because she couldn't stand for very long. And then when she couldn't lean anymore, she had to start sitting down. And then she became so weak, she said, now I have to lay down and perform my namaz al-shab. But never did she give up her ibadah. And finally, when her final moments came, and when she realized that now she was going to depart and return back to Allah, she was going back to Rasulullah, she did not want her children present in the house. So they say she's ordered that Imam Hassan and Hussein, the children, go and leave and go do something else. So they went outside of the house. And now, there they say that in these final moments, she still wanted to go and clean the house, to take care of things so that she would leave it in this situation. And they say Amir al-Mu'mineen, when he comes now and he returns to the home and he sees what's happening to Fatima and he realizes that these are her final moments, he begins now breaking down. And the final wasiyah now is being recited between Bibi Fatima to Imam Ali. And she begins saying, Ya Abul Hasan, Ya Abul Hasan, and maybe repeating the same things that were said by Bibi Khadija to Rasulullah. Said, Ya Abul Hasan, araditani, are you pleased with me? Are you razi with me? Was I a good wife to you? Was I a good mother to our children? Did I do a good job to you? Was I a good partner for you in ibadat? Did I help you in your journey towards Allah? Imagine Bibi Fatima, the daughter of Rasulullah, saying these things to Amir al-Mu'mineen. When Amir al-Mu'mineen hears this, his heart breaks. He says, how can you say all this? There was no greater benefit and barakah in my life than you. You were the greatest thing for me. How can I deal with your loss? My heart broke after the loss of Rasulullah. I can't lose you now too. What can I do after this? I am only pleased because you will return to Rasulullah, but what were all children? What will they do after they lose you? Bibi Fatima continues with her wasiyah. She says, Ya Abul Hasan, bury me in secret. And ulama say that there's probably two reasons why she wanted to be buried in secret at night when it was dark. One reason we know is because she did not want these munafiqeen, these dhalimeen, to know about her burial, to know about her death, so that they couldn't use it as an excuse to pretend as if they cared about her. But some of the ulama say the other reason perhaps why she wanted to be buried at night, to have the ghusl performed at night and the kafan put on at night, is because she had been hiding the pain and the zakhmi and all the injuries she had gone through, and she didn't want Imam Ali to see this, her body in this station. But when she passes, when her soul leaves her body, and Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein, they come home and they're calling Ya Amma, Ya Ummah, looking for their mother, and she's not responding, but Fidda already knows what happens, and she now has to control herself. They go and they see her mother laying down in her mihrab where she used to offer her ibadah. They begin now breaking down. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. And they run to the body of her mother and begin crying. Amir al-Mu'mineen now has to take mu'mineen, mu'minat, azadaran. Remember, these are young children. These are not adults. These are young children. Hassan, Hussein, Kulthum, Zainab are very, very young children. Amir al-Mu'mineen has to take them and say, we have to go perform secretly the janazah of your mother. We have to go wash her in secret. We have to put the kafan on in secret, and we'll have to bury her in secret. And we cannot let the people of Medina know what is happening, so I can't let you cry. Imagine telling a 5-year-old, a 7-year-old, an 8-year-old that you're not allowed to cry for the loss of your mother. This is what these young children have to hold back. And as Amir al-Mu'mineen now is telling them to hold back their tears as he's washing the body of Bibi Fatima, when he now notices what has happened, he begins wailing and crying and screaming. He says, Ya Fatima, what have you hidden from me? Why did you hide this from me? And now what else can he say? He cannot complain to Bibi Fatima anymore. Some riwayat says now, he turns to Rasulullah and says, Ya Rasulullah, Assalamu alayka Ya Rasulullah. I am now ready to return your amanat back to you. But forgive me, Ya Rasulullah, I am not giving her back to you in the same state that you gave her to me. على لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره ماتم حسين.
तेरी उम्मत ने मेरे दर को जलाया बाबा तेरी उम्मत ने मेरे दर को जलाया बाबा तेरी उम्मत ने मेरे दर को जलाया बाबा तेरी उम्मत बाबा फिर वो जलता हुआ दर मुझ पे फिर वो जलता हुआ दर मुझ पे गिराया बाबा तेरी उम्मत ने मेरे दर को जलाया बाबा तेरी उम्मत ने मेरे दर को जलाया बाबा तेरी उम्मत ने मेरे दर को बाबा پھر وہ جلتا ہوا در مجھ پہ، پھر وہ جلتا ہوا در مجھ پہ گرایا بابا، تیری امت نے میرے در کو جلایا بابا، تیری امت نے میرے در کو جلایا بابا، تیری امت بابا۔ لوٹ کر آئی تو چہرہ بھی میرا زخمی تھا، میری زینب کو میری پیشی کا پہلا نوحہ، میرے بالوں کی سفیدی نے، میرے بالوں کی سفیدی نے سنایا بابا، تیری امت نے میرے در کو جلایا بابا، تیری امت بابا، لے چلی قیدی بنا کر جو علی کو دشمن، میں نے چھوڑا نہیں ہے در کی ابا کا دامن، تازیانوں نے مگر مجھ سے، تازیانوں نے مگر مجھ سے چھڑایا بابا، تیری امت نے میرے در کو جلایا بابا، تیری امت نے میرے در کو بابا، تیری امت یا بابا، زخمی حالت میں بھی دہلیز سے باہر آئی، اور علی ولی اللہ بچا کر لائی، عہد جو میں نے کیا تھا وہ، عہد جو میں نے کیا تھا وہ نبھایا بابا، تیری امت نے میرے در کو جلایا بابا، تیری امت نے میرے در کو جلایا بابا، تیری امت آیا بابا، بیٹھ کر پڑھتی ہوں مشکل سے نماز شب بھی، پھر بھی عباس کی خلقت کی دعا بھولی نہیں، جب بھی زخمی ہوئے ہاتھوں کو، جب بھی زخمی ہوئے ہاتھوں کو اٹھایا بابا، تیری امت نے میرے در کو جلایا بابا، تیری امت نے میرے در کو جلایا بابا، تیری امت یا بابا، کون سا در ہے جہاں آپ کی بیٹی نہ گئی، بات سننا تو کجا یوں ہوئی یہ ذات میری، کوئی دروازے سے باہر، کوئی دروازے سے باہر نہیں آیا بابا، تیری امت نے میرے در کو جلایا بابا، تیری امت جلایا بابا، پھر وہ جلتا ہوا در مجھ پہ، پھر وہ جلتا ہوا در مجھ پہ گرایا بابا، تیری امت نے میرے در کو جلایا بابا، تیری امت نے میرے در کو جلایا بابا، تیری امت نے میرے در کو بابا، عرش اور فرش پہ محسن ہوا کوہرام بپا، جس گھڑی رو کے ولایت کی شہیدان نے کہا، مجھ کو ہنس ہنس کے زمانے نے، مجھ کو ہنس ہنس کے زمانے نے رلایا بابا، تیری امت نے میرے در کو جلایا بابا، تیری امت نے میرے در کو بابا، بر محمد وآل محمد صلوات۔
السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا نبي الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى، السلام عليك يا سيد الشهداء بكربلاء يا أبا عبد الله، السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين، السلام عليكم يا أئمة المعصومين علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي، السلام عليك يا حجة القائم بن حسن المهدي مولانا صاحب العصر والزمان، الأمان الأمان الأمان، عجل الله تعالى فرجه وسهل الله مخرجه وظهوره، وجعلنا من خير أعوانه وأنصاره وشياعه والمستشهدين بين يديه، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.